Okay, I didn't want to come if we weren't ready here. Great. I was given this title quite a while back, and as I tend to do, thought about it. It's sort of like I exercised by thinking about it, but didn't do much about it. Oh, where's my clicker? There it is. And so a week or so ago, I finally got into it and looked up the word brand. It's staying true to the original brand. I didn't put that on the. I'm also very proud of my PowerPoint and my typed out sheet because I did them myself. And I know, right? First time ever, perhaps, that's true. And I do want to apologize to begin with. I understand that presentation matters, but this is the best I could do. So, I mean, it was tough. And there's some little letters, places that they shouldn't be, and things aren't the right size, and I couldn't fix it. I couldn't. So please just overlook that and try to hear the message. Although I know presentation matters. So I looked up brand. What is that? Brand is a mark made by burning with a hot iron. It's like, oh my, that sounds serious. And it is serious. Something that is put onto you. Now, I understand that may be at least not exactly the right context, but that is the definition. And original means the fountain, the source, the cause from which anything proceeds. So, what is that original brand? And we know brands. Coca-Cola has a brand, right? I mean, we know, everybody knows Coke. I have hiked up in the mountains to where I thought no one could live and be there. And when you get there, there's a Coke stand. It's like, how did these Cokes get up here? And Cokes are everywhere. And they're all the same. You get the same thing, right? You get what you think you're going to get, a Coke. And everybody knows that. So what is our brand? And I think in order for us to stay true to it, and that's what it says that we want to stay true, I think we need to understand what it is, what is our brand, and how did it happen? How did that happen exactly? What caused that? And I hope that when we're through today, that you can feel a little branded. You feel, my arm's hot, I'm being branded a little bit more than perhaps you've been. And I realize that there's many things that go into the many things, many events, many people that go into the identity of an organization, as is certainly true with CHA. And there are many things we could talk about today. Like, where did we get our name? Where'd that name come from? I don't even know where it came from. Or where did our mascot came from? I don't even know where that came from. So we're not going to talk about those things. And besides, they're not important anyway. Dr. Nawas told us that the other day. It's not about those things. It's about who we are, what's important to us. How did those things become important to us? What happened so that those things were important to us? Well, I want to spend my time today because as I was going through some stuff to move into Mr. Bullard's office, I found quite a few things, and actually the devotion was going to take another turn, and then it took another turn. But as I was looking, it's like, this is what I'm supposed to speak about. And I'm supposed to speak about Mr. Ralph Bullard and the brand that was put on him and how that became connected with who we are. How did that happen? And I realize it's much more complicated than that, I know. But I would like to look at that today and look at 7 ideals that were branded into Mr. Bullard, that were part of him and who he was and how that came to be part of us. So, number one, he was radically saved. If you've heard those stories, he cared really nothing about God or Jesus or the Bible or the church or anything else, and then he was a new creation. Just overnight, a new creation. Radically saved, changed. You hear those stories. He talked about going and talking to his the basketball team that he was on there in high school and the coaches and wanting them to know about the change. And he was radically changed. Things became different overnight. He was marked. He was branded by salvation, by the gospel. It's like, how does we say it's about the gospel around here? Why? Because of Mr. Ralph Bullard was radically saved. And as far as I know, and seeing him, I don't think he ever got away from that. That brand was on him. He never allowed that to be covered up. Number two, when I was thinking about it, and this may surprise some of you, but my number two is he was branded with the value of athletics as a platform to spread the gospel and to teach and develop Christian character. He was branded with that at that moment. He immediately went to tell his coaches and his team. And from that point on, when you listen to the stories, athletics was a place, a platform, if you will. And he was very involved with the FCA, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, there at Edmond High School. At the very first seminar I went to after I was hired at CHA was he wanted me to go to Fellowship of Christian Athletes in Tulsa. Well, there I went up to Tulsa. And so he was branded. That is part of who we are. And that's one of the reasons I believe we've done it well, was because that was about him. And yes, he found a Ron Yoakum and a John and Deanie Merrill who carried that on. But it was him, it was his ideals that got that started and who was branded. And I believe that has been part of us. And I think it's part of us that we don't want to let go. We want to teach and train coaches because it's so valuable a platform. Well, number three, he was branded, I believe, by the Lord, certainly, but certainly also by his wife, Starley, with the sacred position of the Holman Church. She had been raised up that way, and that was part of who she was. She was branded by that. And again, that's a whole other story, but that deep love and commitment for his family and for his church came about. If you were at his memorial service, you saw that as you heard the kids speak about him, that certainly he wasn't perfect, but he loved well. He was branded by that. He spoke about that. He modeled that. I think anything that difference that he had in my life, most of it had to do with the modeling that he did on the Christian family. One of my claim to fame is that I've almost never had to go to an adult Sunday school class. I have avoided that in many ways through the years. And I said until, I can't tell all that. So, but one of the Sunday school classes I was in, I really wasn't an adult, but I was married, a young married class that Ralph and Starley taught. And we would go over to their house, and I mean, there was kids everywhere. I mean, it was 8 or 10 that did, imitation of 100, and just, but yet it was all controlled, and everybody was doing the right things that we could see. And what a great lesson for so many through the years. He was branded with that, And that became part of the life of CHA, I believe. Fourthly, as a young Christian, I don't know exactly the age, 18 or 19, I believe, he was branded with the images, the words, the testimonies that came out of the jungles of Ecuador. And when Jim Elliot and those 4 other missionaries were killed, I was told that was when he had a call to full-time missions. Why is it that he left Edmond High School to come to Christian Heritage? Why? He had really a good job there in many ways because he was called. He was branded. He was branded with that, and the call to missions and the call to full-time Christian ministry that so many Americans at that time felt. The call from Matthew 28 to go and make disciples, that became part of who we are, and it never left him. Never left him. It was part of what he wanted to do. That's why at some point he started the missions here at Christian Heritage. Number 5. So it was in God's plan for Mr. Bullard and for CHA that he was led to Dallas. And you've heard those stories, but he saw those pretty red books and bought one, which was just ridiculous, really. And that he bought that to teach 9th grade history from. But he did. And was invited to a seminar. And he wasn't going until he found out it was free. And he was always wanting to save a penny, to say the least. And so he went and was presented by 2 ladies that no one knew about, and they presented an obscure and little-known philosophy and methodology of education that they call the principle approach. Now, out of all the things that were going on in America at the time, because Christian education was getting started, and, Abeka was big, and Bob Jones was going, and there was a lot of things. And why him? Why then? Why there? Why the ladies? I don't know. It was God's brand on him. And it wasn't about the ladies or the approach. It wasn't about the principal approach then. And if you've heard him talk very much, you know that's not what caught him. That's not what caught him to begin with. What caught him, what branded him forever. And he'll tell you, I am different. I am different because I stood where? Burial Hill. I'm different because I stood on Burial Hill. And he would tell that with such passion when he was there every time. And it was because there was Governor Bradford's grave. And he said we came to be as stepping stones for the furtherance of the gospel. And over there was Adoniram Judson, who was the first missionary sent out from an organization. And it was branded into him America's gospel purpose. That's what was branded. And it's like, I can't get away from that. He couldn't get away from that. Yeah, I'd heard about there was the ladies, and yeah, there was the approach and all that, but that's not what got him. That's not what was eating at his core. It's like, America has a gospel purpose. And again, he never left that. Number 6, I believe, was after he repented, his words, repented, and allowed Miss Hall and Miss Slater, the Red Book ladies, to come to CHA. And they came and presented again a philosophy and a methodology of education that they felt would be, I don't want to say the only, but a type of education that could allow the furtherance of a constitutional federal republic. The type of education that was going on at that time would not support that. And they felt that this type of education would. And it was at its core, again, about the gospel. And he was, at that point, I believe, at that visit, the visit, I call it, it was the visit that branded him. He became convinced that that was the educational way that we should go. It would have been a lot easier to go a Becca. I saw a commercial for a Becca yesterday on TV. It was odd. But it would have been a lot easier. We went to Pensacola. We sit and listen to him. It was impressive. And that's the way we were going, same as every other school almost. But the visit happened. And he was convinced that that was the educational way for us. A method of biblical scholarship and biblical reasoning that could make education effective in the life of a young person. The approach wasn't popular. It's not popular now. It's not easy, but it was our way. It was the way. He was branded with that at that point. At that point, it was over. That was it. We were going that direction, no matter really what it cost. And lastly, as Mr. Bullard understood the need for this approach more and more through the years, it became evident that we needed to restore America's historic biblical foundations. Excuse my voice. It does that. And if you knew him at all, he loved, up until the very end, he loved to tell the story of what God did in the establishment of America. He loved to tell that. In all its variations, he loved to tell that. And he also loved to be involved with restorations. It's why he loved going to Plymouth. Why do you go to Plymouth so much? He surely had seen Plymouth Rock. Well, it wasn't about that. It was about being involved in restoration ministries, being on some of those boards that he was involved with, and always keeping up with some of the political things that were going on, and being so faithful to send us our voting guide and let us know what's going on. And going to the meetings here, he was branded with the restoration. And why? Because it's about the gospel. It's about being salt and light. It's about people having the liberties and the freedom to enjoy liberty and also have the economic wherewithal to help spread the gospel. And he was branded with that, and that was part of what came into CHA. The call, I believe, to restoration. How did this happen? How did our mission statement? And we've said it before. Mr. Booten and myself and Dr. Bauer and Mr. Bullard sat, and 20 minutes, and we wrote this. Like, how? And I remember him saying, I don't remember a lot of things, but I do remember that. He said, well, what are we doing now? All right, let's write what we're doing. How did, that's because he was branded with these things. If you go down through the list and you look, so many of those things are the things I talked about. And I didn't look at the mission statement to do those. But they are who we are and what we were doing. And I know it's more complicated, believe me. And many of you have put brands on the school, don't get me wrong. And that's maybe a whole nother discussion. And I know it's more complicated than this, and I know it was never about one man, but in many ways, it is how we received our original brand. And we're talking about our original brand. How did that happen? And in the challenge, I believe, right here, 13 years ago, Pastor Jaley stood and told us about 107 of the first 109. I found my notes going through some stuff as I was moving offices, and told us about those 107 schools that were created, that were established on biblical principles for biblical purposes. And how many of those 107 have stayed true? None of them. I don't know that's true, but I'm trusting Pastor Jaley. None of them stayed true to that. Harvard went away, and so Yale was established. Yale went away, and then, I forget who was next. Princeton was established. They couldn't keep it. Why? Because they lost their original brand. They lost who they were. They quit being who they were called to be. You know, and it can't just be something that we hear a devotion about every now and then, if we're going to keep it. And it can't be something that we put up on the wall. It can't be that we put, the mission statement up on the wall somewhere. It can't be. It has to be that we understand that it's who the Lord called us to be at this time. You to be. You say, well, not me. Yes, you. You have been called to this because that's who we are. And I think it's something we need to strive to have in our own lives. I think we need to be intentional about having plans to pass that on to our students, because if we're not intentional, if we don't, and I brought this sheet, I don't know where it is now. I don't know where it is. That this is a sheet. You know what I'm talking about. I don't know where it is. I lost it. I'm a magician at losing stuff. I mean, it's really, I should go on America's Got Talent, because I can lose stuff just immediately. It really is fascinating to me. But believe me, it's right here too. I know it. So that sheet that we put together at some point that has our mission and vision and the definition of education and our core values and some of those things, if you're not intentional about looking at those things, and am I including that in my lessons? Am I making that part of what I'm teaching? If you're not intentional, it goes by the way. You have to be intentional about that. It has to be, I believe, our prayer, our passion, our purpose, if we're going to stay true to our original brand. So hopefully that's something that you can make a part of who you are, that you can be branded by that even a little more after today. So thank you for listening.